What an absolute disaster. Washington melts down in a 24-7 loss to Michigan.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show or go live like this. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, Lars, we just watched an absolute disaster of a performance from Washington. And this is one of those games where UW had a chance to take that next step, and they just straight up didn't do it. We'll get to that a little bit later on. It was probably the worst, at least statistically speaking, game of DeMond Williams' young career. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. But when you look at this game, it felt like just everything went wrong at one point or another. What was the number one thing that stood out to you?
I mean, where do we want to start? It just seemed, for whatever reason, UW couldn't get, like, they were like 3 plays behind the entire game, or a second or two behind everything, where you look at, you had some advantages going into the game. Even Chris Peterson said at the halftime where, yeah, I like Washington in this matchup, or I like Washington in the second half. And, Ryan Walters defensively, I don't know what the game plan was exactly, but it just never came to fruition aside from that, first drive when they went 3 and out. That was a good drive. There's a couple of good moments here and there. But for me, just the plan of attack didn't really seem to get anywhere, because Jonah gets a touchdown, but the running game didn't really do anything. Defensively, you couldn't really seem to stop Bryce Underwood when it mattered most, even though they were 1 of 5 on third down at one point. So just, for me, it was kind of a collective disappointment. And you really look at this game thinking, hey, you had all the momentum going, like you said, and just nothing was right.
So I'm glad you mentioned the rushing, because Washington as a team had 40 yards rushing. One of the biggest things to me that was just a massive frustration to watch was, if you take out the 2 sacks for DeMond Williams, he had 3 total carries in this game. And this is something where he's coming off 136 yards rushing against Rutgers. I don't know if that's a scheme thing, if that's something that, like, Michigan's front seven did look really good today. And you do have to give them some credit, because that was one thing that we harped on all week on this show, was Michigan's front seven has a lot of talent, and they can take advantage of you, especially when you look at this game, where I definitely want to talk a little bit about Carver, Willis, and John Mills being out. It does sound like they're close to returning from what Christian Capel was saying before the game. So that's one thing that you do like to see, but it doesn't matter today. And I don't think Paki Finau played horribly. You see procedural error after procedural error after procedural error yet again from the offensive line, which was horrendous. But I look at this game, and no matter what you want to say, because you can point a lot of fingers to Jedd Fisch, rightfully so, because there was just, you saw some explosive plays generated earlier on. Washington had 5 in the game, and they all came through the air in this game. But I just look at so many different parts of this game. You are unable to establish yourself on the ground. You were unable to do so many different things at any point on offense or defense. You said it perfectly. You were a step or two behind on every single play. And then just on top of that, there was just, every time you had momentum, you had an opportunity to just say, okay, look, yeah, things weren't going right. We made a mistake here. We made a mistake there, but we have an opportunity to get back into this game. You just kind of let it slip away. Like, the biggest one for me is the touchdown right before the half. That is an awesome way to generate momentum. Awesome way to do it. And then how do you come out to start the third quarter? 3 and out. And it's just different things like that happened at different points of this game, where it was just like really just typical of this 2025 team at this point, where it's, they're still hanging around. It's clear that this team is better than it was last year. It's clear that there are a lot of things that this team is doing this season that are, just a step or two above where you were in 2024. But it's clear that you still just aren't there yet.
And when you do make progress, because I think it's worth noting, the penalty numbers surprisingly did go down. But to your point about when they happened, all 3 false starts killed the drive.
Yeah.
Here, first, it's like with 2nd and 5, and then made it second and 7, made it 2nd and 12. DeMond throws the incompletion. He almost picked off that first time that he got bailed out on. And then you punt the ball away. Same thing that happened with, I think, Drew Azzopardi had a false start, and I forgot who had the second.
Decker DeGraff had the other one.
Decker DeGraff. And again, we love Decker. Shout out Decker. Had a good play in the game. But again, those moments where you're in these types of games that the margin for error is so razor thin. Yeah, Michigan isn't world beaters this year. They're not the national champions they were last year. But they're still Michigan. They're still a very tough team, especially in Ann Arbor, especially in the big house. Chris Peterson mentioned that with 31-2 at home in the last 2-3 years or whatever it happens to be. And you just kind of look at that and think, well, you can't afford really any mistakes. And the number of mistakes today outweighed the points you put up on the board. If you had 4 penalties, 3-4 turnovers, including turnover on downs, you outweighed yourself right there because you only found 1 touchdown. And that one really still took a lot to get.
And that's one of the biggest things for me is even that one drive, it really did look like a struggle. But on top of that, there were so many opportunities where I think about Damon Williams' second interception. And that was a drive where you were clearly starting to build something. It was an explosive play and then another explosive play. First to Desmond Roebuck, then to Denzel Boston. It was, okay, yeah, you're working with something here. And there are clearly some things that you can figure out and you are starting to build on it. And then you just call the stick route, which I don't necessarily think that the call is the worst thing in the world there. But when you're gashing them on the outside, why not try that again? Why? There are so many different things you could do. And it's clear that the second interception, I want to get into that a little bit more later on too. It was just Damon was moving too quickly at that point and trying to rebound from the first pick. And it was, all right, we're going to hurry up. We're trying to do this. We're trying to do that. We're trying to move as quickly as humanly possible here. And it just all fell apart from there. And it was really disappointing because this was a game where there are so many mistakes that you can point to in every single aspect of this game, in every single quarter. But going late into the third quarter, it was still a tie game. It was still a 1-possession game before that second pick too. You had every opportunity to win this game. And it's something that is just really frustrating and has become a theme so far this year for Washington. And I still have a lot of faith in this team. I still think this team has a lot of talent. It's a lot better than it was last year, but it's very clear that it's not able to take that next step just yet. And I don't know if it's youth. I don't know if it's coaching. I feel like it's a combination of those two things because there's just so many things that you can look at that Jedd Fisch just did decision-wise in this game that, I really liked the 4th and 1 call. It almost got blown up, but Jonah Coleman did a really good job of cutting back, finding the first down, whatever. That is in and of itself a strong move because you need to make a move like that to win these big games. But then you shoot yourself in the foot in one way or another. And you did that continually in this contest. And it's obviously been a theme, just again, of this Husky team under Jedd Fisch, both at home and on the road. But especially on the road, these things just continue to show up over and over and over and over again. And you just have to wonder, at what point are you going to look at some of these things and say, all right, we see these things continue to happen, but what are we going to do to just take that next step and get over the hump? Because it hasn't happened yet.
It's ironic that you perfectly phrased that in a way to where you said that in every single quarter. Why not start in the first? 4th straight game where you don't score in the first quarter. You had a perfect chance to do it. And Grady pushed it, flat out pushed it. And we love Grady on, what he did in 23 will be never forgotten. He did great, but last season was not great. And then this season, you look at the Rutgers game, you look at a couple other games where, I think he was 5-5 going into that game, but it just seems like something is off for whatever reason. And you might say the special team is getting a push and, maybe it could have been even blocked potentially, but it was a great kick, got it off, slightly high snap that Luke Dunn got down, and he just flat out missed it. And I think to me, you bring in Ethan Wilczek, why not give him a shot at this point? I know I put it out on Twitter. Michalski, yeah, sorry. And, you look at that and say, why not, switch it up a little bit and see what he can do. Because that's a situation where if you go ahead 3-0, you're at least getting points, you're getting momentum, you're feeling better about yourself, where it just kind of was more symbolic of the game to where you missed that one. It almost seems like just symbolic of a missed opportunity for Washington.
So I agree with you that it was a missed opportunity and it's certainly just symbolic of the game as a whole. But this is a game where you can't just continually settle for field goals because, we saw Dominic Zavada miss a kick on the other side today too. But though that is just one of those moments where I don't think that is necessarily what lost you the game as a whole. Because I think you're right that it's still a missed opportunity. You still haven't scored in the first quarter since the Washington State game. Those are still problems. but it's not the number one thing because you look at just, again, the way the offensive line played in this game. It was probably its worst game of the year. I think it looked worse than it did during the Ohio State game. I look at just so many different little aspects of this game. You couldn't cover tight ends at all to save your life. Like that second touchdown to Zach Marshall, he was just absolutely wide open. McElistine just didn't move. Like there are so many different little things like that that were bigger. The 3rd and 11 throw that where you had an opportunity to get off the field. Those are all the other things that you need to continue to figure out because 3rd and long has just been a disaster for this team this year. I wish I paid for something like True Media at this point in time because I'm sure that they would give you a much better just viewpoint on what Washington stats are in 3rd and long. And those are just the gotta have it scenarios that this team has not been able to convert on so far this year. And we need to just kind of find a way to move this conversation over to Damon Williams because I don't think the loss falls all on his shoulders, but it's certainly a game where, for the first time in his career, we can say there was more bad than good. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Washington, Alex McLaughlin delivered in a big way. He was one of those guys who Washington struggled today, but he is always around the football. He had a team-leading 8 tackles today. When the pressure was on, he came through, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. Alex is on a streak. And just like Alex delivered for the Huskies, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply, promo period through November 18th. We've also got a message from our good friends over at Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts for a project fast? Supply House has next day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The part finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. Join the free Trade Master program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. Lars, when we look at Damon Williams' stat line today, certainly wasn't pretty. 20 of 32 for a 63% completion percentage, 209 yards, and 3 interceptions. I want to just throw this out there right now. I'm not going to talk with a 3rd interception. That was just, I think that was a perfect encapsulation of what Washington's day as a whole was. It was just horrendous and awful to watch and just a mess from start to finish and a true circus. But I look at the first 2. And at first, I was kind of happy with what was going on the first play until the ball got picked, because it showed that Damon was trying to speed up his process and throw with more anticipation and throw with better timing, because that has been something that I've certainly been talking about throughout the year so far, that the timing has been a little off and he's been holding the ball, which is something Jedd Fisch has talked about a lot. And the linebacker made a really great read and was in the right spot to make a play on the ball. So it's a bad luck play that happened and a really nice play by the defender there. And then the second one, that one was just not a good play from top to bottom, because I think that you're doing the right thing. You're just trying to push the ball downfield and try to give yourself an opportunity to work back into this game after, the first pick. And you have a lot of chances you have a good chance, I should say, to get yourself back into the game when it is still a 1-possession game at that time. And you sped up the process again. You're throwing more into anticipation. My God, I'm all over the place today. But at that point, you were doing it too quickly and the ball was behind Decker to grab. And that is, when you're throwing too fast and you're making just too much of an anticipation like that, it leads to inaccuracy. And that one was just a little bit more frustrating in a game where, like we were saying earlier, the offensive line wasn't protecting him and just everything was going wrong on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about Damon having his best game of his career by far, without question, against Rutgers 8 days ago, and then follow it up with this. And, it's not solely on Damon, but you look at in the environments that he's played in at Penn State in the whiteout in the second half and at Oregon, and you look through a number of games, I don't think it was the setting per se, But it did seem like today was a case of trying to do too much, trying to be, almost more than Superman. Because when I look at that second interception, like you mentioned, it's why, if you're holding on to the ball too long, I understand speeding up your process. But of all the, kind of decisions to make, that was the one. It made me think of the Indiana game last year where why make that throw? Why make that throw in that moment? Hold on to it.
Because he was open.
He was, but it's again, wait till he comes out of the block and that sort of thing, or out of the cut. And, you look at it and in its own, if there was just one interception, you can live with that. But it's when you add the other two on top of it, he came into this game with 200 interceptions in his career. And he had more than that today at 3. So that's what's so frustrating, I think, is, I understand the whole trying to speed things up, but it's just like, again, was it the moment getting to him? Because I don't really know what do you chalk that up to then?
Well, but there are a lot of things at play here, because I don't think you can say he was trying to do too much when he had 3 rushing attempts in this game. I'm not counting the sacks in that. I don't think you can say he's doing too much with that. I think, as the game moves on, you're starting to press and pushing the ball downfield, like on that third pick. Sure, maybe that's trying to do too much, but it was in both of Denzel Boston's hands. Like that's something that just goes beyond him. The second pick, it's one of those things where this is what happens with a young quarterback sometimes. And this is, and we have certainly not done a good enough job of talking about this part here on the show, is when you have a young, high upside quarterback, the highs are really high because we just saw him 8 days ago against Rutgers, but the lows can also be pretty low. There aren't a lot of quarterbacks who are going to play truly mistake-free football 100% of the time. And DeMond Williams is, blessed to have a good coaching staff when it comes to, what Jedd Fisch and Jimmy Doherty have been able to help him do and grow and improve through the first 7, 8 starts, whatever number it is now, of his college career. And that's wonderful. But there are still going to be lows. And there are still going to be things where I'm sure he's not going to say a single thing about, the moment was too big, anything like that, because I don't think that's true. But when you look at a performance like this, it's one of those things where I think it all starts up front. And missing Carver Willis, missing John Mills, even missing Maximus McCree, who didn't play in the second half. Those are things that showed up in this game. And the miscues from the offensive line, there were a couple of early snaps. The snap count just seemed a little bit off today, where there were a couple of different just ones where I think it was the third down play before the strip sack on 4th down, where DeMond didn't look like he was ready for the snap. There were a couple of moments like that where I'm not chalking that up to him. You chalk that up to the offensive line. There are a couple of other ones you can chalk up to the offensive line. And I look at that group and I still think it's improved from where it was last year, but it's also just hard to get worse from where it was at this point last year. And it's a group where when you have clear young building blocks like Pocky Finau, like John Mills, who again, unfortunately was unable to play in this game. And you look at Landon Hatchett, where I've seen a lot of growth from him over the course of the last couple of weeks, especially. Like, there are things that are getting better about this group. Jerez Party has been one of the most improved players in the Big Ten, full stop, this season. Like, there are a lot of things to like, but the lows are still low, and those are going to keep happening, especially, again, like we were saying earlier this week, against a defensive line like Michigan's, which has a ton of talent on it. Like, I went through the numbers on the show earlier this week. They have 14 blue chip recruits on that defensive line. Is that everything? No, but it just shows that there is a lot of talent in that group, and they were used effectively today.
Yeah, it's a matter of you're closing the gap, but the gap is still there. I think, it's kind of what we're hinting at, where I think that is probably the part that is getting buried a little bit, is Max not playing in the second half. That's probably, where we talk about the drop-off from Carver to Max. There's an even bigger drop-off, arguably, you could say, from Max to Swanee, and, go on down the list, because to me, when you're able to at least hold up somewhat, where you look at the first half, it wasn't great, but it wasn't as bad as that second half truly was. And I think everything just was out of sync. And that's probably what you chalk this game up to more than anything, is you don't have your 2 best linemen. You don't have, not counting Jerez Party, who, again, maybe didn't even have his best game with, the false start and things like that. But it's worth noting that I think, kind of when summarizing everything, this is what, DeMond's 9th or 10th start? I think 9th. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And so that's, again, worth putting into perspective. As great as DeMond is, and as great as DeMond is going to be in 2026, and even throughout the rest of the season, he's still got some learning to do. And I think this is a great learning game for him, where
sure,
he's going to look at his tape on Monday or Sunday with Jedd and say, all right, what did we do wrong? And they're just going to run down that entire list. And then, we're going to find out, can Damon fix it? Because we've rarely seen Damon make the same mistake twice. I would argue maybe all 3 interceptions weren't per se the same mistake because each thing kind of had its own little thing. And so let's see what happens against Illinois. Let's see what happens the rest of the season when you go at Wisconsin. You have another tough road game like that. Those are going to be the moments where we're going to find out, did he learn anything from this game? Or is it just a case of, it was what it was?
Well, look, I don't think it's necessarily Damon is the only person that has a lot to learn from this game. This is one of those games where you look at the way plays were called and the way a lot of things happened with Jedd Fisch and just on the offensive side of the ball as a whole. There were a lot of different things that I feel like you could have done better, where I feel like you didn't really just try to establish the run early on. And I know Michigan's secondary has not been great this year. They've been on the poorer side. They're one of the bottom 5 in the conference, I want to say, in passing yards allowed per game. So trying to establish yourselves through the air is not necessarily the worst idea. But when you have one of the best running backs in the nation, let alone the Big Ten, you establish that guy early no matter what, and you try to find a way to build off of it, because then you can do some more things with Damon Williams. You can try to get him out of the pocket a little bit better. That was one of the things that I don't think we saw, like barely if at all today, was running bootlegs, running different things to get Damon Williams outside of the tackle box. I know we saw a hold on Decker DeGraff on one of those plays, but we just saw so few of it that it's hard to believe that he was just utilized to his fullest potential this year. And again, he does have a lot to learn. There are a lot of things that Damon is going to look back on the film from this game and say, okay, I can do this better. I can do that better. Jedd Fisch and Jimmy Doherty are certainly going to say the same thing. But one of the things that I really do just have confidence in this team with moving forward is because of Damon Williams. I think that he will learn a lot from this game. I think that as we look at the back half of the season, this is one of those games where this was always going to be a moment for Washington where you are going to see if this program had truly taken the next step in the Big Ten under Jedd Fisch. And the answer today was no. And there are plenty of reasons why that we'll get to on the other side of the break. Because we've got a message from our good friends over at Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis, maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. This isn't just another ED pill, it's a total game changer for confidence. The effects can last up to 36 hours. That confidence all day, all night, and even into the next day. The process is simple. You can connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly right to your door. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to rugiet.com and use promo code LOCKDOWNCollege for 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com, promo code LOCKDOWNCollege. Make sure to use our code so they know we sent you. We've also got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats just like I do, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. So as we just kind of take a step back from this game, I still want to make sure we dive into all the different aspects of what happened in this game, because it really is a microcosm of what we have been looking for from the entire Jedd Fisch era, is a way to take that next step. And there are so many different things. And it's another thing I talked about earlier this week when it comes to recruiting, especially in the trenches, is this is one of those games where you look at Washington's offensive line. I think things are moving in the right direction in that department. I don't think they showed up today, but I think when we look at where the building blocks are and what's coming down the pipeline, you can say, all right, things are moving in the right direction there. There's still a lot of questions along the defensive line. And I think that's one of the things that showed up today, because Washington came into this game 7th in the nation, allowing 82.8 yards per game. I want to say it was. That's number 7 in the nation in rushing defense. And you allowed your first 100-yard back of the game, 100-yard ball carrier, with Jordan Marshall, who had 133 yards and a touchdown in this game. And you just kind of got manhandled on the ground. And it's something where you can look at Washington and say, yeah, you need to invest more in the trenches. And this is one of those games where you were really hoping to have it, because You were finally fully healthy. Jacob Manu played in this game. Zach Durfee came back and played in this game. And there just wasn't that much of an impact. There were several opportunities that you had to wrap up Bryce Underwood for sacks at various points of the game, and you missed. Like, there are so many different things where it's very clear that there are things that Washington is doing well and doing better than last season, but it's just not good enough yet to say, or to quote what Nick Saban was saying on College Game Day this morning, where he called them the fourth best team in the Big Ten outside of what he called the Big Three, which I'm presuming was Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon, because they're all in the top 10 right now. And especially after what this week was, where we talked about it on Monday's show, and we saw it from our buddy Jake Butt. We saw it from Todd McShay, Joel Klatt, whoever else. There are people all around the nation saying, hey, Washington should be ranked. This is one of those games where, disregarding what Michigan is right now, where it's very clear they're still talented, but certainly not as good as they have been in the last couple of years. Like you were saying, this is one of those games that Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff can just come in and say, hey, we have a real plan of attack here. We're going to try to punch him in the mouth early. And all of a sudden we can assert our will. You get out of there with a victory by any margin. And you could say, hey, look at that. We beat Michigan on the road. We're 3-0 on the road. We're 6-1 on the year. But you didn't do that today. And I don't think the game plan was good enough. I don't think the trench play was good enough. It's just one of those things where there are just more questions than answers coming away from this performance.
Yeah, it makes me think back to the question we had. I'm not sure if it was Monday or Tuesday, but is it scheme or is it talent? That's why Washington was allowing so few rushing yards per season. And I think it's a bit of both, but more so I think it was the scheme. And I think you ran into a team that could actually run the ball. And that's not a shot at Rutgers, because Rutgers had a couple pretty good running backs as well. But when you don't have as good of a quarterback, you can kind of take that away. Bryce Underwood looked great today. I think, I had questions about him coming into the game, and he was, he did what he had to do, but that's also because you couldn't stop anything on the ground. And imagine if Justice Haynes plays in this game. Sure. Think about that. Like, this game goes from bad to maybe the Iowa game last year. Like, it gets really ugly in a hurry, where the fact that you were in it at halftime, like, that speaks insane volumes to kind of how many benefits you had. Where I think about the early fourth down that Michigan had, where, I think it was Morgan was wide open, basically just flat out dropped it. That's probably 6. When you look back at that play, how much open space he had, that's probably a touchdown there.
Absolutely.
So you look at the missed opportunities that you didn't take advantage of, and I look at the points off turnovers, 14. So this is a 10-7 game, arguably, without those 2 points off turnover drives. Again, in hindsight, you could say, well, without that, maybe they're a little bit better. But it just never felt like, when you look at the Ohio State game and this game, the Ohio State game, actually, you feel better about in hindsight when you look back at how that game went down, because there wasn't the turnover issue. There wasn't the miscues. There wasn't everything feels off. And this game, it just felt like, I don't, again, think it was the clock in terms of, 9 a.m. kickoff, 12 noon. Like, that wasn't it. Let's be real. Like, sure, did it help? Probably not. But, like, that is if we're talking about 100 reasons why UW lost that game, it's reason number 100. And I don't even think it's even worth mentioning, but it's kind of just worth pointing out that's not the reason UW lost this game. It was they were not prepared. They got out coached during the game. And I think when you look at that first 3 and out, Ryan Walters, he said it himself early on in the season, good coaches adjust. You work with the talent that you have and you make those adjustments. We didn't see that today. We saw it against Maryland a little bit. Just flat out didn't see it today.
I agree with where you're going, because the defense, yes, like, the defense was not perfect today and was far from it. But let me ask you this. Washington had 6 drives in the second half. How many yards did they accumulate through those 6 drives?
55, 56,
54. So, yeah, no, you're right in that ballpark. It's 54 yards for an offensive-minded head coach, for a program that has built itself around a big 3 this season of DeMond Williams, Jonah Coleman, and Denzel Boston, to pick up 54 yards in an entire half against a defense that had been struggling, that came in the bottom half of the Big Ten in total yards per game allowed. That's unacceptable. Those are things that cannot happen. And that's what I'm talking about when I say you had an opportunity to send a message, and you had an opportunity to do that, because you also were in opposing territory on your first 4 drives. And you barely came away with points. Like, it took until like the final 2 minutes of the second quarter, to finally get through into the end zone. And that's all you did. That's all you were able to do. You had the missed field goal where, things might look a little different if you have that, but it doesn't change the outcome of the game. There are so many different things that you can look at from how this game played out. And it's just minor mistake. And they're all just building up to a point where all of a sudden at the end, you look up and it's a 3-touchdown loss, and it feels like it could have been a lot worse. Like, the thing that I look at is I feel the exact opposite today that I do at the end of the Ohio State game, where you can look at that game, and despite, what Ohio State's game plan might have been, it was very clear that Washington earned a lot of respect that day for what you were able to do against the number one team in the country. And I'm not here to talk about moral victories, because that's absolutely not what this is. But it showed that you were building something, and it showed that you were going in the right direction. And whatever cornerstone you might have had, that you might have been like, hey, we can point to the Ohio State game and say, yeah, this was great. That was great. These were things that we like, and these are things that we're building on. You took a sledgehammer to all those things in this game, because they all fell apart against a much less talented team, which is the disappointing thing. And again, it's not that Michigan isn't recruiting well. I was literally just saying the opposite of that. They are doing a good job with that. But it's not the team that you saw when Ohio State came to town at the end of September. It's not any of these other teams that you saw that you went on the road and got destroyed by last year, like Indiana, like Penn State, like even Oregon last year. Like, this team is not those teams. And the fact that you are saying, hey, I'm building something. I believe that. I do believe that there are a lot of things with this team that still show that you're moving in the right direction. It's just that none of them showed up in this game whatsoever.
And I don't think, worth noting, that it's not just Carver and Jonah Mills. I don't think, even if those guys were back, maybe it's better, but I think a lot of it gets back to the coaching side of it, where if you have the players, that's one thing. Jacob Monty got to play his third game. You have the pieces, but if you can't put the pieces in the right position to execute, it doesn't mean anything. And I think that's kind of what we saw more of today, where, yeah, the players, Jedd Fisch will say, hey, the players didn't execute the call. Great. Review that call sheet. That's the problem. Like, some of the call sheets need to just kind of go away for a while. And I think once you get Carver and John back, that's going to help, but it won't solve all the problems.
I don't think it's just the call sheet. It's the play calling order. There are a lot of things that if you really dive in, you can use this play to set up that play, but he's doing it backwards. There are so many different little things like that I think that might just go unnoticed in the grand scheme of just watching a game live. But when you go back, that's the biggest problem with Jedd Fisch's play calling. And then once the field gets condensed, once you get down towards the red zone and into the red zone, there are so many things. And this goes back to last year too, where he just seems to have trouble in that area of the field. And it's frustrating because you can figure it out. There are ways to do that. And today that just didn't happen. Like, one thing that I think about a lot is the amount of screens that you called in this game that just got absolutely blown up. I feel like it was 4 or 5 different ones. Whereas, they were calling it on the broadcast. Like, you could see it coming from a mile away. And so Michigan's defense did too. And they were blowing up screen after screen after screen. And it's not that those plays aren't effective. We saw them be effective at various points this season. It's just you are calling them at the wrong times. And yes, that is a play calling issue. And it's one of those things where you look at the scheme, you look at the overall numbers, and yeah, it's working. Like, even if you take out what you were doing against non-conference opponents, Washington still has a very solid offense, and you've seen it take steps in the right direction this year with big-time playmakers and guys emerging. Raiden Weinsbright had a really nice day today. Desmond Roebuck is someone who continues to emerge as a playmaker for this Husky team, but it's very clear that there is still a whole lot to learn from what is going on in this game and what just the overall just idea that Jedd Fisch needs to have in one of these games is, and you need to move forward from there.
Yeah, and you can look at third downs. That's kind of where you can summarize everything, where the down that matters the most and staying on the field, 5 of 12. That's not going to cut it. Especially when Michigan was 6 of 13, so they helped you out. They almost bailed you out a number of times, and you still couldn't take advantage. That, to me, we know Jedd's not going to give up the play calling. We're going to say that until we're blue in the face. But if you're not going to change if you're not going to give up the duties, get it right. Because when we talk about what Jedd Fisch wants to make and what he wants Washington to be, everything falls on his shoulders at the end of the day.
No, absolutely. And that's the biggest thing. And before we get out of here, I feel like that's one thing we really should continue to just emphasize here is it's still clear that things are moving in the right direction. I want to make sure I emphasize that, because this team is not bad. It's not nearly as bad as it showed today, which is what makes losses like this so frustrating. It's you see building blocks and pieces. And I've said this before after wins and losses, you see building blocks at every single position on the field. Every single one. Like, even with John Mills out today, you can see that Pocky Finau is a part of this team's future. On the defensive line, you can see that Bryce Butler is a guy that I think will be a part of this team's future for another year or two, depending on junior college eligibility, things like that. Jacob Manu, Adrius Rainey-Saleh, Ryland Dillard-Allen got a start today at safety. Alex McLaughlin continues to play really well. There are guys all over the field that you can point to and say, that guy's going to be somebody. That guy's going to be somebody. And it comes down to Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff finding out how to figure out some consistency, because that is the biggest thing and probably the most frustrating thing when you look at just the lows, because the highs are really high. Like, look at DeMond Williams last week. The highs, when Washington's offense is going well, the defense starts to get a little bit of momentum, the highs are great, but the lows are just cavernous. They feel John Donovan-esque low, because it's like, and I think it's almost worse than that, because you see the talent. You see everything that Washington has to work with, and it's just, you need to find a way to get this right. At the end of the day, yes, the players need to execute, but it's on the coaching staff, and more specifically Jedd Fisch, to make sure that they do that.
Absolutely. And Jedd has the experience. He has the knowledge, but what have we always said about Jedd? What is a bunch of people said about Jedd that we brought on the show? He's the smartest. He thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. He thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. He's got the ability to do it, but there's some times where it's either you're overthinking it, you think, too hard about something, whatever it may be. Like you said, right play calls, wrong order. Those are the type of things where, hey, you're overthinking it or you're thinking it in the wrong way. Reevaluate yourself, reassess, because you have the talent to do it. It's not for a lack of talent. I mean, again, Carver and John coming back will be important, but the pieces are there. Raiden had a good game. You look down the list, everybody had decent moments, but collectively it was not good. And it starts with Jedd. No,
and that's something where all of a sudden, when we just look down the road, I was going to say before, we get out of here, but this is one more thing that I want to make sure I get out into the world. When we look at next week's game against Illinois, this was always going to be a really important measuring stick against Michigan, but it's now, how do you bounce back with another big test against a team that isn't what it was all chalked up to be in the preseason? I still think Illinois is a really solid team with a bunch of veteran talent, but it's not the top 10, college football playoff fringe kind of opponent that you thought they were going to be, but still a clear top half of the Big Ten kind of opponent. How do you bounce back from a loss like this? Because doing that at home against what's certainly going to be a rocking, hopefully sold out crowd at Husky Stadium next week is going to be just as big of a measuring stick, because if you're able to bounce back with a win next week, maybe people are going to have questions about the whole home versus road thing, which I think is still going to be fair. But I think that there is just so much that is going to ride on this game now, because you had a little bit of leeway coming into this game with a loss to Michigan. You didn't want it to look like that, because if you lose, a 3-point low scoring game where it's, hey, yeah, the defense fought really hard and, you just couldn't pull it off, and it's very clear you're not ready for that next step just yet. That's one thing. But to lose in a fashion like this, you need to bounce back in a big way. And that's where it really comes back to the coaching staff, is how are you going to make sure this team is prepared for what is certainly going to be a big time fight against Illinois next week. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all every day who's tuning in. We really do appreciate your support, especially when we go live like this. It does mean a lot to us. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel through content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.